call anything to order or anything. You guys just go nuts.
Perfect.
There you go.
You don't know what you're in for.
So what you all have in front of you, you do have a copy of the presentation. So we'll go through that, and then we have the survey, ongoing survey, early engagement summary here. So we're gonna walk through this, but that's what you have in front of you just to differentiate the materials. But we'll jump into the presentation. For us tonight, we're going to spend a good chunk of our time talking about that engagement summary and what we heard through the open house and through the survey that closed. I think we closed it Sunday night or Monday morning. And then, so as we're going through this, we really want you to be thinking about what are the themes that are emerging here? What does the public want us to be talking about? What direction do we need to be going? What analysis do we need to be doing across all of our required plan elements within the comprehensive plan? So keeping that lens, because the middle part of our agenda is really diving into what are those themes. So hopefully, and Patricia has a leg up because she went through this with the outdoor rec plan last week, but what are those key themes that will inform our goal in the next step of the process? And then we'll close by just talking about what those next steps are, what that means for plan analysis and where we're going from here. So we've had we're at this part in the process, we've got a lot of that good fluffy information that we can start to work with. And now we're getting into that next phase of that technical, spreadsheets and maps and data part of the process. So working through that with us, and then just hitting on our next steps as we go forward. So like always, we'll start with our introductions and what are you looking forward to getting out to do outside this spring, since it's finally kind of nice. I think I saw the first time for the sun as I turned into to get to City Hall today. I was like, oh, the sun, I haven't seen it in a couple of days. But anyway, so for me, we have horses at home. So it's the fun time where you can be outside with them. And we actually have some judging kids coming to town this weekend for a judging clinic at the college. So it's a pretty big deal, if you didn't know. But the kids are very much looking forward to it. So yeah.
I'm just looking forward to seeing all the greenery. It's my first spring here, so it's really exciting.
And I'll use my savings. It was last year. I like to garden also.
I'm Patricia LaRue, and what I look forward to is walking around Lake George, because this time of the year the ducklings are out, and I love watching the mom duck try to coax her little babies, and they all just they're just so cute. Sometimes they walk right down the path like you're not even there. So that's always really fun.
I'm Rebecca. I'm with Amy. I look forward to being outside and planting.
So I'm Chris. I just look forward to getting outside.
Yeah, I'm Diane, and I'm with Chris. Also, we've got a nice patio in back, and it'll be nice to we pre-pandemic, we used to like to have people over. So it will be nice to do that again.
Yep, I agree with everybody. Just getting outside, getting out in the gardens, planting again, getting up in the cemeteries, working up there, just outside and stuff.
I'm Mike, and I'm looking forward to kayaking on the McKinney and other places around. So that's good.
I'm Lisa, gardening and kayaking, not right away in spring.
Yeah, early summer, late.
Tough summer, tough winter, so.
Emily, I'm looking forward to seeing things emerge in my garden because I don't usually do new plantings, just constraints in my yard, but I did see some squill.
Yes.
And the sunset trees. Awesome. It's life.
Perfect. Well, it'll be a technology challenge, but maybe we need to have an upcoming meeting outside. So we can a park space. And we did that a lot during the pandemic over the summer. So, yeah. But anyway, it's a little hard to have a screen and record a meeting and all that good stuff. But anyway, so just before we kind of jump into survey summary results, I just wanted to highlight the community profile and projections. We talked about that at our last meeting. But if you looked at your packet, an updated profile was included in your packet we're not gonna dive deep into anything here, but wanted to just kind of highlight that we did make some updates to it after our discussion. Scott took a look at things, so we made a few updates and things throughout there as well. So just kind of concluding that part of the process in the sense of remembering that this was just documents to create a foundation. We're gathering some data to get that base level understanding for us to now start to grab more information on based on the key themes and direction that we're going to establish through this process. So, this information hasn't changed, same things that we've talked about before, just highlighting some of those key components. Housing was one of those areas that we made an update in terms of that owner occupied versus renter occupied. I think we had a 25-75 split when we checked last time we rechecked that data. It's at more of a 50-50 split between owner occupied, renter occupied, just some of the updates that we did. Through the projection conversation, we had more conversations after our last meeting with you all as well. But in looking at that 22,000 number seems to be making sense and digging into a little bit more of the housing study and those projections out to 2030, looking at recent housing trends and things, that seems to be kind of the area that is making sense for us. So moving forward with that as our projection for 2045, that projection will also be used in our other plans, like the outdoor recreation plan, which needs to look at what our population estimate is for the next 5 years and then the next 20 years in some benchmarks that will be done for a needs assessment. So just kind of highlighting again that that's where we're at in the process. But so we'll get to go from there as well. But then that gets us into our engagement summary. And so just highlighting our activities here before we dive into the full summary. Of course, we had the open house. Saw some of you, if not all of you, there. So that was great, other than the snowstorm that we, but I think at first we thought, oh my goodness, a 5-hour open house. This was a long time, but I think if we would have tried to condense it all, it would have felt a lot more hectic. It was a really good, when I think we were hitting the people that maybe would have come after work, but decided to go home instead, so they'd have to deal with the snow. It was a good flow of people coming through. So we did clock over 100 people that attended the event with us. So, and I was kind of paying attention to my watch. I think some people were spending like over 45 minutes, going and attending or participating in the different activities, having conversations. So I think, and we did see a good cross section too. There were, people brought their families. We had some kids in attendance. We had some students in attendance, some that have been members of the community for a long time, some that came with some campaigns that they wanted to make sure we were aware of and things like that. So I think that was really great. And then we did have the survey that was open to kind of complement and provide a virtual opportunity to engage. We did have over 60 people participate in the survey, and we have seen a continued uptick in the people that are enrolling in EngageRF. So the intent of all of this together was, again, to understand experiences, starting to look at issues and opportunities and what themes emerge to kind of set us on the next course of what do we want to be looking at across our 9 plan elements.
If I can just jump in on EngageRF just a little bit. I'm just going to chat with you, but we're planning to next week potentially put out for Pet Mayor.
What? Sorry, I'm sorry.
We're going to put out next week for Pet Mayor.
Pet Mayor.
To try and get people to engage on the site, so they can nominate their pet to be the pet mayor.
Very nice.
So.
Then I can step down?
Terlingwood, Texas has a goat for a mayor, so.
So people put they'll download a picture of their cat, dog, whatever animal it is, and then people vote on it?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Whoever gets the most likes.
I bet we get way more responses to that than the survey.
I bet you will too. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll get a lot of-
Don't let them vote until they've answered a survey question.
There you go. That's a good idea.
Exactly.
That's funny.
So we're continuing to try to innovate and try to get people driven to this site, and we'll continue that through the year.
So does that animal become our
Mascot?
mascot then
Well, yeah.
Well, the mascot for this,
Yeah.
for Focus RF, right?
for Focus RF?
Yeah.
So we'll come to all the meetings,
Right.
any engagement things will be
Through
asked?
the press.
Oh.
Yeah.
You can do is there,
Yeah, okay.
We're continuing to reach out to the community too. I think we'll be at Lions in April, and I think we're set up to do a presentation at UWRF's kind of exec team. So,
I talked to a couple of people from campus media and I directed them to you, if
Okay.
that's okay.
yeah,
It would be Student Voice and maybe WRFW. There's some journalism course work that's being done, and I think I mentioned it. I was wearing my hat and I said, it's this thing, and so,
good.
and so, but when I was talking with them, I thought, well, I'm gonna give you your name. So they might be
Good.
contacting you. And
And 10 points to you for wearing your hat tonight.
Thank you.
it's on the way out the door, and it was
It's
just
like,
hanging there.
fine as it anyway, right?
Right.
You know it's going to go.
And I think, and now Kendra, you probably know the number better than I, are there over 300, right?
About 320.
Yeah. So, I think the next phase of with the pet mayor that we're really excited for is the incorporating some activities that people can interact with on EngageRF. So everything that's been up there thus far, if you've submitted you've hit submit and your answer's gone into, the cloud, the interwebs, whatever you want. But the next phase will be looking at activities where Lisa will post and I can see what Lisa says and I can give her a thumbs up, a thumbs down. I can comment on her post, some more interactive components like that. And so EngageRF also lets us track the number of site visits and activity and those kinds of things. And so we're hoping that through these activities as well, people start interacting with EngageRF in a different.
So these won't come to our personal emails. This is just something I log in, and then I see what people are doing.
That, yes and no. If you have a really great idea that you start, and people start engaging, commenting, you will get posts or emails back to say that, that Stephanie commented on your post.
Okay, and it'll tell me it's EngageRF, so that, because I get a lot.
Yeah.
And some goes to spam, so,
Yeah.
okay.
So there is a little bit of kind of, back and forth from that side of things, but unfortunately, if you had a dud of an idea and nobody says anything, then you won't hear anything, but.
I have a question. When there's new items to interact with on EngageRF, do you push a notification out that there's new things to interact with?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and we're being very conscious of how frequently we push out those emails for the sense of trying to not do it so frequently that, I know my Gmail automatically puts stuff in social or promotion or whatever. So trying to be a little consistent with that. So we're working on the timeline that we're kind of gearing at like one update a month. So you can kind of get a little cyclical of when you see that information, coming through and pieces like that. So, yep. We will still continue to use social media when we have some things that warrant bigger attention. You don't have to have an account with EngageRF to interact with some of the components. And so we don't want to only use the e-blast from EngageRF as our only form of communication because we're only connecting with the however many people that have signed up at that point. So making sure that we're continuing to use broad promotion as we're posting things as well. So. Okay. So then let's jump into the survey results, which I have in PDF. You want to
Yeah, I was,
Or I don't know.
yeah, it was right there.
Oh, okay.
Guess I can download it. Is that okay?
Yep,
Okay.
it's just fine. Okay, I figured this was easier to go through this way, so you have the copy in front of you here. So, what we've done here is summarize the comments, the themes that came out of both the open house activities and the survey. So there were questions that were asked the same way from both the survey and the open house. We've combined all of those results together in questions where the survey, for example, didn't have the opportunity to build a typical house. We asked some questions to kind of supplement that information. So both are provided throughout here as well. We do have, of course, all of the raw comments. If you are the kind of person that wants to go through thousands of comments, we're happy to share that information with you. But the hope is that this is even 50 pages to try to summarize everything in a readable format. So we will kind of go through here. I'm going to highlight the themes and things that we found as we went through and did this analysis. I know you're seeing this for the first time, so please stop and ask questions. I may not have the answer. We may need to go dig a little deeper into the questions, but please ask those questions as we go through, because any refinements that we maybe need to make to this summary before it's broadcast wider would be good, using you all as that steering committee to kind of review components from that perspective. As well, we did organize these bike plan elements as well. I did include the comments that are specific to the bike ped plan and the outdoor recreation plan at the end of this document. We're not going to dive deep into those with this group, but just so you know that they're there as well. So to start us off, the first question was, what was one thing that River Falls can be proud of? So start with a word cloud there. Obviously, I'm sure you've all seen those before. The bigger the word, the more frequent it popped up across our comments. This is one of the questions that was both in the survey and at the open house. So this, if you saw a copy of the summary from last week, this has changed because it has the survey responses included in it as well. But the kind of the easier to digest component is on the next page in terms of the top themes. There we go. That came out. So we ranked them by the number of appearances, or the number of times a comment aligned with some of these things. There were some changes as we incorporated the results to this ranking list from what the open house had to when we included the survey comments as well. The same themes emerged, but the ranking and order of them did change a little bit, which is interesting, when you add in those 60 additional comments. So our number one component when we think of things to be proud of was our natural resources. And that's anything from the river to Lake George, just general open space and connection with those resources was number one. A lot of different components there. We did separate out parks from those natural resources. So parks was our number two. Before we added in the results from the survey, parks was our number one. So a little shift there. Obviously, I think the park one is pretty easy to understand there. We did also separate out recreation. So if there was specific talk about, trails or walking, biking, hiking, that fell under that number 5 of recreation. Recreation, interestingly, did also slide after we added the survey results as well. But sustainability, or that focus on renewable and clean energy, was heard very broadly, particularly at the open house. That was a very strong component. It didn't emerge as much from the survey, but a big component there. And then the social environment was the one that rose from our survey, specifically from our survey responses. And from there, we were grouping together a lot of comments about the fact that River Falls is a welcoming community, that we are a friendly community. There is a space for people to interact and get along and collaborate and those kinds of things. Then as we get into some of those were really, when we look at the top 5, there was a lot of comments in those top 5 themes. Beyond that, we start to get a few less. But in terms of our businesses, our quality businesses, a big focus on the downtown across comments. Downtown maybe could have been its own category or theme in these comments as well. Obviously, the notation of the great school systems, probably a higher preference on the university over the public school system, but kind of grouping everything together there. Do want to call out growth here because it pops up as in a couple of different ways. The notation of a desire to grow and connect with the greater region was identified as something to be proud of, that we're doing good things, that we've had good recent growth. We'll have some different comments that show up in some later places, so wanting to highlight that there. But things like quality of life, like appearance and character, our facilities and housing. I think there was only one housing comment actually, but the one other topic that did emerge specifically out of our survey comments was the city government component. So there were some very specific comments about the city operating in a fiscally responsible manner, applauding the city for how they got through the COVID-19 pandemic, some of those things, so wanting to make sure that that was specifically called out there as well. So anything surprising on kind of these themes that emerged of things that people would be proud of?
The library, I'm surprised it's that far down. They do a fabulous job. They have displays and they have, people come and read and they do childcare stuff.
Sure. And of course, these are just ranked by the number of times somebody commented
Sure.
on it. So that's totally what the ranking is here. It's just the number of appearances it had. So. That's it. Okay. Then the next question was the reverse of that, which was what's a concern or issue for the future of River Falls? So you see some of the same words, community, I think was the number 1 word in proud, but then it also shows up here in concern or issue, but housing, downtown, diversity, affordable, some of those words popping up here again in the word cloud, but then jumping again into that same structure of themes. Housing is our number 1 here in a few different contexts. I will note, obviously affordable, you saw affordable was pretty big in that word cloud. The need for affordable and safe housing was highlighted quite a bit, and that's where a big emergence of the housing topic came across the comments. But then there were some more specific comments about that really are in some ways that they are conflicting in terms of there's some that want more student housing, more apartments, more some of the newer housing typologies, and then others where we want less. So they're just conflicting back and forth. And you see, somebody wants a reduction in the R1 zoning or getting rid of R1 overall, but then others want less multifamily housing. So it's not surprising to me that there is a difference there, but it was interesting to hear some of the comments pop up about like the property maintenance and renter rights and some of those things. It was at least interesting to me on a broad question like this, where we're not even on the housing topic, that people pulled out some of those things as things they wanted to highlight. That's meaningful to me, that kind of elevates an issue there versus just saying we need more housing, right? But then getting into some of the other components, sidewalk and trail infrastructure, overall just a desire for more, right? We always want more, but
That's every town, everywhere.
exactly, yeah. But the safety component highlighted a fair amount, and then a more connected network. So yeah, not terribly surprising there, but the nature and sustainability kind of grouped those natural resources and sustainability together here. Things aligned a little bit more on just using more sustainable practices when it comes to resource management, some of those components. There were a few comments about the dams and preserving the lakes and some of that activity. We had some pretty lengthy comment forms that got into some detail there as well. Yeah,
Sorry, I'm just a little curious with drinking water included in nature and sustainability as opposed to infrastructure. I was curious why that might be. I mean, obviously you need to have clean water to drink, but it seems almost more of an infrastructure
Yeah.
issue. Sorry.
yeah, no, I think it,
I mean,
It's also a pollution aquifer.
Right, yeah, that's for
Yeah.
sure. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
no, I think it could be in either, and
Yeah, water quality certainly is a sustainability issue for sure.
yeah. But then, if we can continue down the list here, business and economy, kind of a slew of different things that kind of fall in here. Some specific things about, increasing fees and changing policies, economic diversity, high paying jobs, kind of a, that list of things that you would kind of expect in terms of needs from a business and economy perspective, but that lack of shopping opportunities definitely does get highlighted. Later on here as well, community needs and growth. This was a theme that did not emerge in the open house, but was big enough through the survey comments that it popped up in here, made its way in as number 5 when we combined all of the results together. And so whether that gives us an insight on who is participating currently in EngageRF online but so there's, like I mentioned, it was highlighted as something we can be proud of how we've grown. But was some concerns raised about the rate of growth, maintaining our existing sense of place, not losing that small town feel that we were very proud of in that first question. I added that fears of losing River Falls that emerged in a couple of places. There were some pretty specific comments throughout about pointed at maybe some policy direction or experiences that we'll talk about a little differently. But so again, just it was interesting that was not an open house, it's not a theme that we really saw there, but more on survey results. And again, we have to remember you have different audiences that participate in different things as well.
I guess I have a question with that, and this is the total, what was the total number between, you had the open house and the online survey was 3 something? Was the participant?
No, we had, I think we had 63 survey responses, and then I think we clocked 101 people that attended.
And I guess that's my concern about the snapshot that we get is then if we do a different kind of incentive, it's a different demographic, and then we're gonna start seeing the things that you just mentioned. And in this work, have you seen that if you get a certain number, you start to get a pattern that you can be confident in? And if we don't have, like right now, we could introduce, some of these other incentives, we get a different demographic. That's a blind spot right now.
Right.
So maybe you can speak to that.
Yes, yep, and that's definitely, as we're looking at these results and kind of understanding some of those differences and things, something we want to be mindful of. We could, a city would have to invest a ton of money to hear from everybody in a process. And so part of it for us is reacting to what we were able to collect and then changing and pivoting our next forms of engagement to make sure that we're hearing or confirming some of the things that we heard. Not everybody that participated in the survey participated in the demographic questions, so we don't totally know, which age groups and the tenure in the community and those kinds of things that we heard from there as well. And of course, we're only making physical assumptions when we were seeing people in person at the open house, right? So from that standpoint, as we're looking at these results and thinking about the next phase of engagement, is trying to think about who didn't we hear from, what groups do we want to target? So is there a certain community group or location that we can target for a pop-up event or something like that? But then also what topical areas maybe seem a little goofy in here. So the fact that particularly this growth concern emerged here, is this a focus area for engagement that we need to go out to the community and have a question on EngageRF that gets specific to say, is this true? Like confirming this with a broader section of the public, is how we then pivot into the next phase of the process, if I'm making any sense.
So what, with the public engaging part of this, what, is there a percentage of the population we're looking for? Is there a number? We'd like to hear from 500 different people. We'd like to hear from 30% of the what would make you guys happy? Because Amy knows, everybody else here knows, this is a community that really doesn't engage. They don't care to engage, not because they're reclusive or anything, just because they're happy with the way things are.
Exactly.
That's exactly.
You know what I mean? So what would make you guys happy for engagement? And how
What would make us happy?
Well, I'll ask everybody a question.
Yeah, where do we have confidence that it's?
Yeah, right, kind of about what you said. Where do we have, all this means nothing to me because it's 10 people. You know what I mean? So where do we get to be where okay, I see now that there's 500 people and they're kind of all in the same boat about growth, or they're all in the same boat about whatever.
Sure.
But how do we know when we're there? How is everybody gonna feel comfortable when we know we're there?
Right.
Because things get really one-sided and things like this real fast.
Can I tell you my
sorry.
perspective? Usually I hear from people, because I'm on city councils, usually I hear from people who have a complaint.
Yeah.
And these are people who aren't necessarily complaining, so it's like,
Right.
this is like nice raw data.
Yeah.
For me, but I feel like, okay, so I now have comments from about 160 people who I otherwise wouldn't have information from.
Yeah.
But I personally filter this through what I know about the city and
Right.
what I know have been issues in the past and like all that background stuff.
Yeah.
So this, I think, well, for me, I see this as helping, maybe helping focus stuff going forward, but only through the lens of what I already know.
Right, I guess that's, yeah.
But, yeah, I'm certainly willing to, if we keep, because we're gonna be keeping engaging with people, and if we get like loads of folks who are like, oh my God, we need that bridge across Lake George, we need it now. Like I'll listen to that.
Right.
And didn't we I feel like I got a survey not that long ago.
Oh,
Like a
probably
community climate?
the happiness survey, yes.
Something from the city that was a survey that I filled out. So, what, have we looked at that compared to this? Like, I don't know, I don't remember what it was, but I got it.
Oh, yeah, we do that every other year.
Yeah, so have we looked at that survey? Because if it was just done, I think it was done this year or maybe late last
That
year.
was last year.
That's not that old of data. It might help complement as well some of the stuff from this, this input. Because I feel like it wasn't very long ago.
No. And that's kind of always the same. It always sees the same data every time I do the survey.
Yeah.
So
You're
you're
right,
right,
a lot
really
of-
changing.
A lot of the stuff in there can
It
be,
seems like it would be relevant.
yeah,
Yeah.
put into this.
So,
But
and
even that's not a big, what do we get? 30% out of 1,500 people?
Yeah,
20%, so.
but I think when you do a sample like that, you can start to see a pattern and you can.
Yeah.
if it's a more
Over the course
random.
of years, yeah.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I was kind of getting at, is that what's that number that tells us, okay, we could be confident that the wind is blowing in this direction throughout the, so, that's what I'm.
Yeah, and that's the hard part in this process of, because you could, we can look at some numbers and say something that we're not gonna be statistically significant, right? So we could say that it's hearing from 10% is what we want, right? That's a good number, but then there's also, maybe that 10% is all of your people over the age of 70.
Right.
And then, so that there's so many ways to look at this, and there is unfortunately no, great recipe for how to make that happen. The part and how we use this data is the important component. we want to understand what the public is saying to drive this, like, help us drive this process moving forward. But this is particularly why we meet with all of you, because the four of us, you know, staff and SRF could sit down and look through this and create the goals and write a plan tomorrow. But you are all having conversations and different experiences within the community. So if there's something, you know, here that you learn that was never something you've heard about, or something that seems totally contradictory to, you know, themes that you're hearing throughout the community, that's a part of the conversation that we want to have with you. And again, this data helps set our course or give us direction on where we want to be heading. And then we also need to use that data to say, okay, yes, you know, and this is the one area where, you know, affordable housing, number one concern moving forward, is of the lack of affordable housing actually an issue? Or is it that there's an issue of accessibility or something of that nature? Like, again, there's a perception, we as the public aren't technical experts and everything. So we'll take this information and.
Well, and how you define affordable housing too, because what's affordable for me
Right.
may be not affordable for somebody else and vice versa.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, Mayor, I mean, the fact that people aren't just pounding down the door means people are kind of happy, like they're fine.
That's the way I look at it.
You know, if they're not complaining, then they're okay with it. So you can almost take some of this as a good sign that people are pretty satisfied. And if people aren't unhappy, they're not gonna complain.
That's what I was, yeah.
So that's what I was gonna ask, has there been any kind of a national survey that say, people with a positive outlook are more likely to become engaged, more likely to fill out surveys, more likely to go to open houses, where someone who's not satisfied is more likely to stay home, more likely to, is there, or just the opposite, the person that's angry is more likely to go to an open house, more likely to.
I'm sure there are national statistics out there from my personal experience where the louder voices are those that are upset.
Yeah.
They
Okay,
have a
so
bonus.
we would have seen a lot more upset, if there were.
Yeah.
We would have seen a lot more negative things coming into the open house where people like, okay, I'm gonna give them what I'm thinking. They're asking, I'm gonna tell them.
Yeah.
But there is also too, the unhappy people don't always show up at this end of the process. They'll show up at the end of the process when it's like, wait, you're gonna do what to the what? And then you're like, oh crap, now I have to show up and yell at people. When, you know, you do all of this effort at the front end to get feedback and they don't participate, then they show up at the end to complain about what you're actually doing. And what I try and do when I do these sorts of plans is I try and build in enough engagement so when the naysayers show up, the city council or whoever can say, we gave you an opportunity to talk and all of these people said they want this. So you 20 people that show up now to complain, we have, you know, 500 people that told us something different. So we're gonna listen to that 500 people and y'all can jump off a bridge. Not that you would ever say quite like that, but the implication is there, right? You wanna have enough support on the positive side. So when you make those hard decisions, you can tell the naysayers that will show up at that point. You had a chance, you chose not to play, we're going on what the, you know, more people told us.
Yep. And I think the other part of this process, that's a 20-year vision is a hard thing to get somebody to want, like, you know, I don't even know where I'm gonna be in 20 years and I do this for a living.
Related to that statement is, we're the people who were, you know, putting stickers on boards. And I think I had to keep reminding myself that this is a forward-looking thing. This is 2 decades out,
Mhm.
or the span of 2 decades. And
Yeah.
we're, you know, when people are engaging, do they have that in mind, or are they thinking a shorter term, or are they thinking now? So they're answering the question as if it's now, well, I'm satisfied with this. But do you think you'll be satisfied with, is this a priority for the future?
Yeah.
So that's kind of maybe a little trap there.
Yeah, and then we are very thoughtful in how we frame a question too, because again, it's very hard. You know, in 20 years, I'm going to be in my 50s. I honestly have no idea what I'm going to need when I'm 50. And so asking me to answer a question for where I'm going to be when I'm 50 is a very hard thing for somebody to do. And so that's how we manipulate some of this data and use it. You know, we need to be thoughtful of as well. The next phase of the process, when we're actually testing ideas and getting into, you know, what type of, a little bit more specific about housing needs and things, that's where people can latch on to something they're a little bit more interested or having, a stake in. So we typically see an uptick in the next phases of engagement as well, because it's something that people can grasp onto a little bit more as well. So. Okay. I'm gonna just keep us moving here to just make sure we're respectful of everyone's time here too, but this is good discussion. So the next components here were the Mad Lib station of creating your vision. And so there are some pretty unique and interesting thoughts here. This is the one we did provide at the back of your printed document are all of the statements that were created, because I enjoyed that part. So that's just for reference there. But in the summary here, we pulled out some of the themes that emerged here with just one example statement. So that first vision statement was, in 2040, River Falls will be a community that is known for our what, fill in the blank there. And so some of the themes that emerged here were development in terms of being intentional and smart with our growth, an emphasis on the downtown, economic development in terms of, diverse businesses, growth in our business and industry sector, neighborhoods, both from a just housing provision standpoint and that sense of neighborhood, recreation emerging here again, our natural resources. You can see these themes emerging as we work through that social component. Again, concepts of, inclusivity and embracing diversity, sustainability popping up here again, and utilities. And we end up using utilities as a theme in a lot of ways, but that connection to clean drinking water is really kind of the lead component when we're talking about utilities. Same thing in terms of the summary as we get into that second vision statement or fill in the blank of, in the future, River Falls will celebrate what by investing in what. So you'll see a couple of similar or consistent themes popping up here. But also, emphasizing things like our amenities and the people within the community, but things like our resources and recreation and sustainability popping up here again. So, and this is one where, it was a good thought exercise for people participating to kind of jump in, but it's interesting to see those themes of where people, when they thought about the future of River Falls, where their brain went in terms of kind of those topical areas is, I think, the interesting part of the results of this activity. Then the next question, and the vision statement was just the open house, just for reference as well. That was not in the survey. But the next was, what community issues or opportunities are you most concerned about over the next 20 years? This was a question that was asked on the comment form for those of you that were at the open house, but then was a survey question. So we did get input from both opportunities there. Our top issue or opportunity here was maintaining and growing local businesses and industries. So that it's another interesting, economic development was kind of in the middle of the rungs and some of those other pieces. But when we lay out a few specific examples here, that economic development component ends up there at the top. But protecting our natural resources and enhancing our parks, greenways, and open spaces coming in at number 2. Maintaining and enhancing city systems and services, and maintaining community affordability coming in as well, along with mitigating effects of climate change and natural hazards. I will say that this one is a much bigger topic here in River Falls than in a lot of other communities that I worked in, even in communities where they added a plan element that's specific to resilience or hazard mitigation. So I think that's notable there as well. So those were really our kind of high level issues and opportunities questions, kind of looking at things broadly. Then as we jumped in, now we get into our specific topical elements. So starting with housing. So we started with, this was an activity at the open house where we asked people to build an ideal home. for themselves, for their parents, for their kids. So we went through the process of they picked a housing type, what amenities they'd like to have, whether they'd like to rent or own, and then had a location of where they'd like to that home to be placed within the community. I won't go deep into the results here, but here you can see by location. So they had the options of core neighborhood, downtown, a new growth area, or a new neighborhood where there are options for where to place. And so that you can see some of those, the different types of housing that people selected, what amenities they'd like to see per location. And then
I have a question.
Yeah.
What would be neither? So did that rent or own?
they just didn't select
Didn't
anything.
select.
Oh, they
Thank
didn't
you.
say neither, they
Yes.
just.
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
It's a co-op, man. Nobody owns it. Just live there, man.
But then, when we get into kind of some of these summaries, then you can start to see where some of those trends started to emerge in terms of, the overall, the biggest number of housing types built was that small lot, single family, student, there was the least amount of student housing. The other was, interesting in terms of what people identified as other, whether it was slab homes, or I think some of it was stuff that kind of fits into some of the other categories, but some specific components coming out there. But then again, just seeing, where those different locations are.
Is this a slab home's a home without a basement?
That's what I assume.
Yeah. No, I'm from Texas. We don't have basements, so.
Sure.
Yes, that's it.
RV.
Living in RVs today.
The folks did it for long years. They were full-time RVers for a while.
Yeah, it's not bad.
When I was talking to people at that station at the open house, some of the other categories, when they were asking, what they could do or what, accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
Was one, and tiny home.
Yeah.
Couple of things that people didn't feel fit into any other category.
And then the next chart gets into organizing the amenities by housing type. So you can see, when they were the different types what they wanted to be connected to. So again, our small lot, single family, the near parks and greenways, and a walkable, bikeable area kind of being the top amenities that emerged. But everything kind of popping up throughout there as well. So. Oops, wrong keyboard. Then we get into the survey questions. So again, the survey didn't have that same activity, but we asked some of those same questions. So just how satisfied are you with the housing available in River Falls? So trying to understand from very satisfied that I can easily find housing that's within my budget, has the amenities that I'm looking for at almost 19 or 20% of respondents, to 10% being very dissatisfied. I can't find access that's within my budget with the amenities needed for my family. So again, this was just the 63-ish people that responded to the survey. So it is interesting to see, a pretty big swath as we're looking at specifically that question. There isn't the the majority there at 33%, a third of respondents. So it's interesting to see that comparison.
Yeah, I would imagine if probably people that responded to the survey already live here, so like, yeah, it's fine, I got a house, I live here, it's fine.
Yeah.
So I know talking to other faculty members who were new hires, and the struggle they have. When I moved here, I struggled to find a place. That seems low to me,
Okay.
that only 21% are dissatisfied. I would imagine it would be higher if we had more
We have
responses.
more dissatisfied people living.
Yeah, exactly. Once you can find a place to live but want to live here, aren't doing the survey. Yeah, I think it would be harder, because I know, again, a number of new faculty members that are like, couldn't find a place to live in River Falls, so I'm in Prescott or Hudson or wherever. Yeah.
Then we get into some more of the questions of what style of housing have you occupied in River Falls. So this is just kind of understanding some of that context as well. So kind of interesting to compare, you know, that small lot is the top there in terms of where people have lived. But that's just kind of understanding the, you know, thinking about where people have lived and what those experiences are. Then getting into ranking, we then asked people to rank the needs of the different housing styles. So these are the same list here with the addition of mother-in-law flats or kind of ADUs from that side of things. But so they ranked them from 1 to 9. So 1 being what we need the most of, 9 being what we need the least of. So the smaller the number in terms of the average here, the higher it ranked. So again, same message coming out here that the small lot single family was the top ranking need there. You can kind of take other out of the equation because not everybody hit, yeah. You don't have an idea of other, you don't rank it anything. But senior housing emerging, so there wasn't a lot of senior housing built in that activity at the open house, but it emerged as the number 3 ranked need when it comes to the results here.
Interesting.
And then finally, we did ask the amenities question in the survey. So this graph does give you a comparison of the survey and open house results in totality. So you can just kind of see what pops up and emerges there. But so interestingly, the neighborhood being the top survey response versus walkable and bikeable and near parks and greenways being the top responses in from the open house. Then we get into transportation. And so this was just a kind of a comparison between how you currently moved and the way that you'd like to move and how things emerged there. So there wasn't much of a change between when we added the survey results here, but I don't think of any surprise. People identified, you know, most people are using a personal vehicle and traveling alone versus how they would like to move, having walking and biking, you know, emerging from that perspective. Those are just some other comments. So then we get into the specific survey questions that we asked. We did ask a little bit more here, but it got into a question of if you, knowing that assuming that primary mode was going to be your personal vehicle, asking the question of if something happened to your personal vehicle, what would you do? What would be your change there? And so, you know, the different mode popping up, doing a ride share opportunity, changing travel needs. The other comments are kind of funny because they're mostly, well, we're a 2-car household, so it's not really an issue. So
I could call Lisa.
Just a bike.
And then we also asked a question about emerging technologies and how important that was. So, you know, you see very important being there in at 30%, 22% is important. So, you know, a strong majority there as well. So, then we get into our economic development activities. So, this was trying to just represent the dots that were, so this was from the open house where you put your dots on the map here. So a lot of activity for where people work or buy groceries, being here in the community. Kind of the big difference here is that retail goods component and that shift out of River Falls. So it was interesting. It's kind of interesting too that the within 10 miles was the bigger focus even than online, you know, in some capacity there.
Yeah, I think people considered Hudson within 10 miles.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
You've got all the chain stores.
Yeah. Then we get into the survey questions here as well. So here we were asking what the goals of economic development should be within the community. And, so there is a desire to attract more local businesses, but supporting and enhancing existing businesses was a higher priority for a few. Supporting investment in local entrepreneurs. It's interesting to me from the survey results that the attracting of big box retail emerges in some other written comments a lot more than it actually showed up here in terms of the results compared to others. So just kind of interesting how, and this was the select all that apply. So, and then the next page gets into, we had some open-ended questions about if someone was a visitor in River Falls for a day, where would you tell them to go? There are a lot of specific answers, tell them to go to X, Y, and Z. So we kind of summarized some things here, but.
And was this on the survey?
This was on the survey.
Okay, I remember that one.
Yep. And then what is one business or activity or event that you've enjoyed in another community that you wish was in River Falls? And so again, some specific things here, but some, general themes that popped out. We had highlighted retail stores and we included clothing stores as part of that, but clothing just was repeated. So I wanted to make sure that clothing popped up. There's coffee shops was also another, there's a lot of talk of different restaurants, but it was more like we need a Taco Bell and we need a whatever and whatever, but there was lots of just coffee.
Apparently there's a new one, I guess, that opened somewhere.
Waystone, it's on, Walnut.
Next to the Methodist Church.
Okay.
What is it?
Is it by Mimi's?
No, on Walnut, so it's by, is that,
It's right, it's by kind of near the,
Jen's barber shop.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay, check it
Yeah.
out. Do you want me a coffee shop?
I think the one thing that I was also, it melted my heart a little bit that popped up was attending a community event as something that people should do in the community. That's not a theme we sometimes see a lot. So I thought that just kind of.
Bacon Bash is pretty great. For real.
Oh, we heard the king.
Oh.
On both weekends.
Yes.
Kitty is also awesome.
Then we got into our utilities and community facilities. So how should we prioritize community? So this was the spending activity at the open house. So this was only at the open house where you got to spend your $100. So, and this was again, assuming that our utilities were funded and maintained. And so we took utilities out of it. I don't think it's of any surprise parks was the number one there, but everything got a little bit of money across the board.
You almost had too many like you gave us, I think, 10 marbles and there was like 10 choices, so.
Yep.
It's like you just put one in each and it's fine.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting the trade-off of if you really want to highlight something, what is the one
Right.
thing you're not going to put your money into? Yeah,
Yeah. Burn it all down.
Yeah. And that's funny because there's a lot of times you hear, we need more parking, and then when it comes to actually spending the money, you're not willing to put your money there. So
It's kind of that way. I was gonna say this when we were talking about housing. It's kind of that way with housing where we want this kind of housing and then when it's presented, well, I want it, but not in my neighborhood or, that kind of thing. So and then try to figure, how can you, tease that out of this kind of
Yeah.
data?
Yeah.
You can't really.
Then we get into our survey questions on the topic of utility and community facilities. So they're just looking at where we should increase investment in our utilities to start out with. Then going into our community facilities, so things like police and fire, public transit, sidewalks and trails and parks and waterfront being big components there again. And then the last was increased investment to improve or enhance infrastructure maintenance responsibilities so broadband and fiber being the top answer there with energy efficient upgrades coming in number 2. So
I wish it could be.
So you didn't do fiber.
No, we can't.
right, so that's one of the things where we kind of need to balance what the city has the ability to affect change in, but also where we can promote and advocate for things that are needed.
I think it's interesting being on the utility commission years ago, sewer infrastructure kind of hangs low. And I think there's just an assumption that we'll always, have because we're in really good shape. We built that out pretty well. And I don't know where we are and where we'll be in 2040 with that and,
Yeah.
and investing in that with population growth versus the gallons that we have to process.
That's so unsexy though. Nobody thinks. about
Right,
it.
exactly.
Problem, nobody thinks about it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I haven't joked that city government is best when it's invisible,
Yeah.
but nobody,
You're correct.
everything just happens and no one complains.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, doing a comp plan for Ellsworth right now.
Yeah.
We just found out, and I don't know why they didn't tell me this when we started the plan, but they have capacity in their wastewater plant for 75 more single family homes. That's it. And they're at capacity.
Wow.
Like, well, there goes all the money for doing anything else. Like,
Well,
might as well stop planning
since
now.
They didn't grow during the last 10 years. That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, but they're at capacity now. And it's like, well, there goes all your money for the next 20 years again for
Yeah.
that. So
Wow.
it's gonna be an easy plan to write. Expand your wastewater plant. That's it. One goal. You're done. Carry on. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Nope, it's okay. Then we get into our, land use specific questions. So here at the open house, we had, marbles, so you can drop in, a marble in every jar, but what types of growth, are needed within River Falls? So we did have 4% of people drop a marble and no additional growth is needed. But, seeing top things like,
That's surprisingly low, actually. I was only 4% of that. That's pretty good, yeah.
so I think ends up being maybe a little bit higher with the survey, but, the, 24% with retail goods and services that recreate indoors and outdoors, popping up and emerging places to live, things like that. And then, the next table gets into, some of the themes that emerged. So not only did people, drop a marble, but they also had some specific ideas of those different things that they'd like to do. So.
I think that is cool.
Oh, yes. Good call.
Well, you do want a place to poo, though. That is important. I'll be honest. That is important.
We were just talking about sanitary. Oh, I've never had that one happen before. That's
It's nice to recreate.
And then we get into the, what was the question that was asked in the survey, which was, how would you describe the supply of different types of land uses? So we get a little bit more specific here. But going from there's too much in the red to, well, no opinion in the dark blue, but the green being there isn't enough, or we have the right amount. So, we don't have too much of recreation, indoor recreation, parks and trails, entertainment and schools. See it pop up in a couple of other areas, but multifamily residential here in the survey being the one.
Like apartment buildings.
Yes, yeah. But even some saying that we have too much single family residential.
Probably by senior housing getting 10%, 15%.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to see how things
Sure.
shake out, but yeah, I think, and even it's good to see, there, of course, we always are gonna want more parks and recreation, but a good chunk saying also that we have enough, understanding that, looking at that as the need being met in some of those things. So I think it is really telling and interesting for us to be thinking about for the future when we look at our professional office space and the industrial and manufacturing space, that a majority of people have no opinion from that side. So I think that just in terms of thinking about who maybe responded to the survey and how they engage in that section of the community, important thing to kind of think about from context there.
Yeah, people that don't work here, probably business owners and like.
Yep. Then we got into our natural, cultural and agricultural engagement activities. So this was another dot exercise from the open house. So getting people's level of agreement with some of our different statements. So overall, we're doing a good job in preserving our natural and cultural resources, and people have the ability to interact with those activities. The two at the top are where we kind of had some differences there in terms of doing a good job celebrating the history and the culture, and then the kind of couple on the agricultural side, a strong connection to local farmers and food production. So.
I wonder how much of that maybe we did this in February when the farmers market had been open for 6
Sure.
months. So, you know, you're in the middle of summer when everybody's at the farmer's market and there's tons of produce and stuff.
Yes, and it's also what you think of as farming, because there's not like the dairy farms around that there used to be, so.
Yeah.
It's more produce.
And the next page has the same question asked, just it was different. We had a different data set there to able to look at things a little different. I think it is interesting. Well, so they're in the reverse order here, so you see kind of the same responses mirrored there. Won't dive deep into this one, but from we did ask community partners and who we should be engaging with to help us achieve our goals. So a few different things. I didn't know there was an optimist club.
There used to be, they're no longer.
Oh,
Change your CUTC to CBTC, Chippewa Valley.
Yeah.
Technical.
okay. I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I assumed it was, but I didn't want to change it because I didn't know if there was something else we were missing there. So
The optimism went on to the optimist club.
yeah. So that does include all of the comments from both from that standpoint. So the next pages I'm not going to go into are the specific results for the activities that were specific to the bike and ped plan and the outdoor recreation plan. You can feel free to peruse those at your leisure. So as you're thinking about that was a lot of stuff to kind of wade through, but again, thinking about the themes and topics that we saw emerge, what we learned and things like that. We want to be moving now into thinking about what does all of that engagement mean in our understanding of currently what's going on in River Falls. What is that direction that we want to be moving forward? And so the next step of our process gets us into what are our goals? What do we want to be looking at in terms of what are our goals for the next 20 years? And so we could jump to the establishment of goals. And really goals are intended to be that thing that's our desired outcome. Who do we want to be in the next 20 years? And they're written in a way that hopefully you can use as plan commission and then council is able to use as you're making your decisions. We could sit and develop those goals here tonight. It can get a little laborious to some extent, but we like to take a step back first to identify what themes emerge to then set the goals. So rather than boring you with having all of you with sitting and coming up with those raw goals, we want to highlight what you guys see from the theme so that we can go back, start to create some draft statements that we can have them work with, get your reaction from and make sure we're headed in the right direction. So
I don't think any themes came out that we don't already work on or worry about or
sure.
try to fit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't see where our goals are gonna be much different than what they already are.
Which is also good to know if we're over the right track.
Right.
But yeah, concern for the environment
Yeah.
and access to the environment, essentially, access to outdoor spaces and housing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, housing diversity.
Yeah.
That covers everything from affordability to style of home. And I mean, it's pretty broad, because obviously you need economic diversity in terms of how much housing costs, but you also need diversity in terms of what kinds of housing you're offering, from, big apartment complexes to ADUs to senior living to whatever. And then I'd say connectivity and accessibility. So providing access, thinking about transportation more in terms of people than cars, shifting that thinking to how we can make our transportation system provide access for people and not just thinking about how we can move cars.
But then we also have to have a place to go. If we've got all that, all those ways to
Yeah.
get places, we need places to go. Whether it be coffee shops, whether it be a senior center, whether it be indoor recreation. But, so we can get there, we just have no place to go.
Amenities and facilities, yeah.
Well, I'm seeing something omitted here, I think, where would retail be in this? It seemed like that was quite a theme of, and I think that has to be driven by outside diversity. And
Right.
so,
How do you get the outside forces?
Yeah, these are your current plan. themes.
Okay.
So I brought it up because you made the comment that it's
I see.
it's consistent. So the one thing I would note with all of that is, yes, we're recognizing there's a lot of the same themes of things that we're proud of. But are the things that we need to work on different? And if they are still the same of what we need to work on versus what our current plan is saying, why haven't we taken any action? Is there something broken in that theme that we've identified? If not, if it's still that we need to be working on that, then what is it then it's the next phase of the process of how do we change our policies or recommendations or actions to actually take action on that next phase of the process, if that makes sense. So your current plan, and I'll maybe jump. I should just close this because I'm not even using it. Your current plan in terms of the structure of goals, and hopefully you're all familiar with this, but I thought I would just highlight it quick. You have your overarching themes that really identify those goal areas that you want to be working on, then your guiding policies and implementing policies that are that structure for how you're going to take action or implement those goals and those standards. So just thinking about, again, those 13 themes that we've identified here. The plan did a good job of making sure you're following state statutes and having a goal area for each of the required plan elements. It did achieve that. But just wanted to highlight again what you've been working on, and hopefully again, we've got nothing new to you, but that character, community-oriented development, sustainable growth, urban form, mixed use, community-oriented downtown, transportation alternatives, economic diversity, housing, quality of life, intergovernmental cooperation, the review process, which says streamline the planning and review processes was the statement that happened under that goal. And then implementation being those.
Have we done an inventory of the existing plan and can we say we did this, we're in progress on this never got looked at or touched again once the plan was adopted? Has anybody done that?
We've made an assessment on SRF's end. Part of this next phase of the process is a deeper assessment when we've identified what we're currently getting from engagement to go back and see where we need to make.
Yeah, because I'd be curious to see if there are things from that plan that were just never looked at again, do they relate to what we're seeing today in terms of concerns and issues? In which case, just plug it right into the new plan. If we didn't, but figure out why we didn't do it, if it was identified in the plan 12 years ago, 15 years ago, whenever it was done, why wasn't it done?
Yeah. And I think the one thing I would say for me is this structure is deep. You have to work through a lot of stuff to work and kind of find what you're looking at here. So
That's
from
my
my
problem.
perspective, that's an opportunity for us to clarify this structure of our goals and themes from that side of things, other than there just being a lot that we have to work through here as well.
What were you gonna say?
Oh, I would, the way the city works, I would be astonished if there was something on a plan that was never looked at again, because, oh my God, we get reports.
When was the last comprehensive plan done? I don't remember. Was it early 2000s, right?
2005.
Yeah, which 5 years of financial crap followed that.
Right, yeah.
So there wasn't 5 or 6 years, so that kind of.
Yeah, I would imagine anything 17 years old is probably
that,
super transferable, but.
But so in terms of those topics, there are some similar themes here, but that's where
Yeah, I think if because I've looked at the old plan and it's way too long and way too much there. And no one's gonna, I mean, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm a professor and I don't read that much crap, like,
Exactly.
it's just too much.
Yep.
So shrinking down, because,
Mhm.
I mean, I know the 9 themes from the state law are things you have to address, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to have 9 chapters, 1 for each thing. I mean, we can like, they can kind of lump into different spaces, I think.
Yeah, and so one goal for us as we are continuing this conversation on themes is understanding what our opportunity is too. All of these are connected. Yes, we need to have the structure, so we're talking about housing, we're talking about transportation, we're talking about land use, but you can't have any of those 3 without the other 2. And so how can we think about establishing these themes in a system-wide approach versus a topical approach? That's why you have us, is to help you understand and make those connections through that process and make this a more system-based approach from that perspective. So we don't necessarily need to go terribly. I would like some, we've thrown out a couple of things here, so I'm gonna use the whiteboard really quick because we've already started to throw things out, but I want you guys to just take a minute, maybe stretch if you gotta go to the bathroom. We were just working through a lot of stuff if you need. But want to take the opportunity for you to throw out some more of those key themes and concerns. Again, thinking back at what you can think back to the 13 themes that we already have, but what are those things that emerged? I already wrote down, the maintenance of recreation, housing diversity, connectivity and access, and creation of destinations. Think about what those themes are that you want to make sure that we as staff are thinking about when we're coming up with these draft goals. I think the really important thing is this is also going to direct us in terms of what analysis we need to be looking at. So I'll use that housing example again. If housing affordability is really something that came out that we need to look at, we will be looking to confirm that that actually is an issue or understanding where that comment would have come from. So let's just take a couple minutes quick here and then we'll come back. So put your idea thinking hat on. And if you come up with good ideas, then we can buzz through this really.
It's just doing this.
You could do an infomercial since we're online. Watching.
And I was thinking.
We online? No,
It's being recorded.
Commercial.
They can more people listen.
I was thinking we should show the group that we're being.
Real.
Fair.
For the 4 people that are gonna watch.
No.
this.
Right.
But if I say it can be.
Yeah.
Your local 88.7.
Yeah.
I still haven't put on the parkboard one.
Yeah.
How was your recruitment event?
Oh, yeah, I will do it.
We got 2 DJs.
Yeah, that was 100%. Sorry.
No, it's about 20% more.
I saw it on Facebook, so I thought that was great.
Yeah, they, we gotta wait a little longer. It takes a couple days. People are like, okay, I'll fill out the application. We got 2 already. But what happens is they realize, oh, all the late slots are open. Then they kind of, I don't know if I want to get on the air at 11 o'clock at night on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
But some do.
Got these college kids. Those kids go on the web.
Like some of them are, and I find it.
Like 7 hours.
I had a couple that were, that would go on at midnight to 2 in the morning. And then I discovered some of the content wasn't really FCC approved and.
It would have been midnight till 2 in the morning.
Right.
Is
Yes.
Brianna still? She and her partner or husband?
Yeah, she and her husband did a Friday show.
She moved over by another one.
Oh, she.
Yeah. She moved up. It's here every day.
University staff can get on there, trying to get more interest in that.
What kind of show does she and her husband?
So Stephanie, is there a certain
Theme-based,
desirability
yeah, like-
level of renting to owning.
Seventies disco one week, eighties new wave the next. And
I
they talk about
mean,
the
I think there's lots of research that shows.
But you were at the university?
But it's not.
You were in the university? How did I not know this?
Because when you're in college town, it
Pay
becomes
attention, kids.
work,
Um,
we have a
and
lot of
then
renters, I got
Okay.
5 people in one.
What do you do?
Right, yeah.
communication specialist.
Yeah, but there is a lot that,
Cool.
there's the connection between that renter and ownership and your workforce is
Reconcile
also a
the
really
theme
important
versus
critical component.
what people are saying they want.
Depending on what type of industry you have within the community.
I just
Yeah.
look at it as
There's
there's
such a
more
range of
Things, but yeah, I mean, being a university community, just.
right. Or the word, or the word.
But I think in that same sense of that everybody tries to own a house is also ever changing.
Yeah.
That's, it stays.
We talked about housing today. class. I can give you the whole section.
And then there is a desire to be a homeowner.
Yeah, we just come back to
people,
study
you know,
down.
being-
Well, the question is, can you find affordable housing where it falls? Well, I've lived in my house for 30 years and of course I can afford it. So I'm gonna say, yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was answering it, now someone else might say, yeah, but your mortgage is from 1976. So it's like 6 people per house.
Yeah.
That's the thing is when you look at, but like say you wanted to sell your home, could you purchase something, in town?
Where do you go for the, I mean, you sell your house for the same amount you buy, right?
Probably, yeah. Because my first house I bought in 1977, it was $35,000. It was a nice house. I mean, we had 4 people, we were living comfortably. But when you're just.
$35,000 is about as much as Mike made as a professor when he arrived in that.
We're not making that much more than that now, I'll tell you that.
He's not making that much more than that now.
The samples.
Yeah, and our first house was 70,000, which was just
Look at.
94.
Yeah, I was lucky when I moved here because I moved from Austin and I owned a duplex and lived in half and rented half. And so I took advantage of Austin's being a completely insane housing market. So I moved up here, like what was affordable to me moving here was like, not nearly affordable for someone else.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, I think I couldn't find a rental and I was hoping to rent for a couple of years.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like hype during the whole.
Yeah, if it's a duplex or something like that.
That's the what's your price?
Right.
This project's gonna be.
Yeah, but I also was
Okay.
older, somewhere that I was looking at, we'll try to get rid of stuff, so like a townhome, yeah, there was nothing in 2018. like, there is a whole-
Now I know better than to give you guys breaks.
Yeah, I know.
To get you back.
We're off,
It's okay. So I encourage, but let's keep this dialogue going when you guys are kind of just throwing out things here. There is, like I used the line with outdoor rec last week, there's no bad idea here. Try to think about, let's not think about the barriers. Let's just think about what our actual needs are. What do we want to be focusing on? Don't worry about whether the city's gonna have money to do it. We want to know what those things are that we need to be looking at. So just start throwing stuff out. I'm just gonna be writing on the board.
I would say for housing diversity is zoning code overhaul.
Okay, I'm not to implementation yet. Take your planner hat off. What are our issues?
Your attention. Sense of, community.
And history.
Maintaining the feel.
And what's the Army?
Those are resources. These are my cues, so to make sure that we're talking about all of the plan elements that need stuff.
Okay.
Would something like affordable downtown retail space be applicable?
When you say affordable, do you mean from the consumer or?
Well, no, I guess like as a, if you wanted to create a new business.
Okay.
I think we have a.
Maybe put that as like, business, increased business opportunities, the affordable. And the affordable space would be part of that.
What the innovation center's for.
Yeah, I know.
I think we have a good foundation of parks and trails already, and it's just kind of connecting the dots of what we already have more than new stuff that we need necessarily.
Connecting to believe new stuff.
Well, yeah, but it's like we have to build an in park or.
I know, it's like we got great ones.
Yeah, we just have to connect it for
Community
sure.
center.
That's utilities and public facilities.
Okay. Good to know.
I eat.
So when we talk about the or when we talk about retail, is it only restricted to downtown? And when I was thinking about that number of what people were saying about a lack of it, I wonder how much that number would have shrunk if there was still a big box store in this town or a little big box like we used to have. And I don't know where that fits into any of this. If it's a separate item or if it's retail overall.
I said downtown just because, there was lots of comments about vibrant downtown, walkable downtown, retail downtown, historic downtown.
And I guess
So
I'm
think two
pointing,
different things.
yeah, and I'm pointing to this, to that, I want to get clothing
Yeah.
and whatever, other consumer goods that would not be maybe a smaller shop.
I think there's
Places.
I think there's opportunity for redevelopment and infill development. And there's a lot of ugly strip centers on North Main that could go away and be something better.
You ever get down to the south side?
There's some on the south side too. Yeah, I'd love to see that north end of Dick's turned into something way better than that.
It's South Main plan that
Yeah.
opportunities galore.
But yeah, there's lots of ways to do better with what we have without building new stuff on the outskirts.
And there is a question in the survey that emphasized that more people wanted infill and redevelopment than they wanted fringe growth.
Mayor, would you like your cooperative agreements up here?
No, you guys keep ignoring me. I'm done. I'm just gonna go in the corner and pout. Yeah.
Talk about.
Is there just cooperative agreements in general or?
Those are gonna be long done before we even start realizing this. Those are gonna be done in the next year or two. How's that? Now that we have a full complement of planning and development people.
Troy, here.
That is intergovernmental cooperation.
5 years.
Yes, we do. We do.
And
Which one didn't we get anything under it?
So the one question I would have for you guys is on the economic development sphere. We've talked a lot about retail, but we haven't talked that, so you've got places to spend your money, but what about earning money in River Falls? Is there anything?
that's what all our business parks are for.
Yeah, well, it is, I mean, one of the survey results that we got in the packet was, I mean, people live here and they work somewhere else. People live somewhere else and work here. So that's, I mean, it's like, there's just so many commuters.
Yeah.
Both going in and out. So not everyone like leaves, but that's an issue. I think.
That's a good one because that.
And the people who are doing, I know the people who are working for the university who are doing some of those lower paying jobs, can't afford to live here, they have to come here. to go to work. So, and I'm guessing that more of the higher paid people are leaving.
Yeah.
Myself included.
You get the gold star, because you got the one that has 3 plan elements associated.
There you go.
Well, and I mean, I guess I'd say, supporting existing businesses, I'd see that, I'd prefer that over recruiting new businesses. So.
I think you do both.
Yeah, both, but oftentimes so many communities, focus on the business recruitment side of things and they neglect the existing businesses.
Yeah, that's why I think it's really great that the city like checks it, and isn't it Scott, or is it you check in with like local business?
There's a lot of that.
So,
It'd be nice to know with all of our full industrial parks, the employees that are there, where they come from. I mean, because as you come out, I mean, how many people work at all the different, out by Tattersall and past there? Where do they live?
Rebecca has some insight to tell what you.
So we had turnkey corrections in the Square Market on campus, and so we were talking specifically about, they have a really robust internship program, and so many of the interns that the College of Business has had students, they transferred it to a full-time job. And they're having trouble recruiting that age of person, young person, newly graduated, because they're having trouble finding a place to live. And so one young person, she's living with her college roommates still, and she's like, I hate it. I want to live somewhere else, but she was like, I don't know where to live. I'm having a really hard time finding a place to live. And she was, what I'm gonna end up doing is probably moving to Woodbury or, someplace else. She was gonna want to, I like River Falls. But it's just, and so they have 90 people that work there at the River Falls location, their headquarters. And I mean, I'm pretty sure just that's one person. It's probably a common theme for many of the people. They employ a lot of young professionals. So I would assume that it's a common theme.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that. If employers are struggling to find employees because they can't afford to live here, that's an issue. Sounds like
And
it
that's
is.
just one,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one example of a
That's a
bigger.
very good example,
for sure.
People, it's quite a few people.
And if we're talking about trying to recruit retail, if the retail employees can't afford to live here, especially with $5 gas or $4 gas, I guess, like, are you really gonna drive for a retail job with $4 gas? You're not gonna drive that far for it, so.
And so we encouraged, the CEO was with us, and we encouraged him to either reach out to the mayor, reach out to you, to talk about that. That's an issue, because we were talking about, I brought this up and said, we'd love for feedback from a business owner, different viewpoint than I had, different viewpoint than y'all have.
For sure.
For feedback for this.
that's one of the reasons that developers are building so much market rate housing now. Yeah, they don't need the subsidized stuff. It's like, there's a market for it.
Well, the subsidized stuff's all to build.
Yeah.
Getting low income housing tax credits and all that's real.
Is that a useful question to answer? Surveying the employers and trying to, not to get into personal information, but at least can you tell us the communities, just the city names that you have? You got 3 from Hudson, and you got, 4 from Stillwater, or you got, 6 from Woodbury, whatever.
And a dozen from Ellsworth, I mean, I'm
Right,
trying
yeah.
to think of,
Yeah. Does that help
How
us
effective-
knowing that answer? Does that help? Does asking that question and having an answer help us make decisions? Or
I
do we just have?
think just knowing that they're from somewhere else and want to live here but can't is probably the bigger.
I think that's the bigger question, is that is that they would want to live here if they could, because.
So you have
sometimes
to build the survey that asks that question, in
Yeah.
addition to identifying that they live somewhere.
Yeah, because they might not want to live,
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
They're-
they're
they would spouse
jobs.
that.
like live somewhere,
Their
they got
kids are in
perfect house,
school.
they don't want to live here, but
But then the next question is, does that deter manufacturing for someone to come here and build? Because they can't get employees in the area that can afford to reside close to where they work, so that's.
So we've never had a company come here and say they're not gonna build here because we don't have the employees.
But this is a whole different ballgame these days.
Oh, yeah, it is.
So that's what just
It's still
the
there.
thought was.
Yeah, no, they still seem to be coming and wanting to build, and that's always my first thought is, holy crap, you can't find anybody to work and you want to build, but they do, and
And they find people to
they
work.
find
and
people to work,
They find
but
places to live, but
it's,
It might drive the wages up.
yeah, well, yeah, which is a good thing too. But we know housing is an issue. Every city, every town, every community has housing.
100%.
You know, we can beat that to death. We know what we have to do.
Yeah.
That's just
We
kind
have
of
a
a
good plan.
mute point.
We did it.
Yeah.
we're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So I think the one maybe thing that we're missing here in this conversation is the community facilities and utilities component, if there is anything that we should. I think we only have that one.
Well, from a 40-year standpoint, it's looking at, you know, I remember when we expanded wastewater treatment and that seemed like it was just not too long ago, but it was 15 years ago. And when is that catching up to us, and then we're gonna have to address that? And
Because we do everything else.
We've got a lot of capacity.
we still do, okay.
We still do.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have more.
Okay.
You know, extending it out to Man Valley. But one issue with utilities is resilience. Storms are going to, you know, with climate change, storms are going to get worse. Natural disasters are going to happen, you know, can our water supply, will our electric lines take, you know? It will, making sure those systems work.
Yeah.
Is going to require more work. You know,
more money,
planning.
more work. Get
This-
mystical, Barry.
Does the state have requirements, like again, in Texas, when your wastewater plant hits 75% capacity, you have to start planning for expansion, and then at 90%, you have to start building the expansion? Does Wisconsin state require any of that? Do y'all know?
I don't know. I think common sense would tell you that.
I mean, common sense, I would, sure, but you know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Think of health or the health.
Look at elsewhere.
No, I don't think they do, because even Hammond years ago had a problem.
Yeah, so I was curious, you know, because that kind of forces you, like, you know, this in Texas anyway, you're forced to be like, okay, we better start thinking about this.
Or you'll be happy to know we think about that all the time here.
Oh, I'm not worried about it. I'm really impressed with how y'all run things. I'm super happy with the way things work here. I'm very pleased.
Are we missing anything?
Well, we didn't talk about transit at all, but I don't know,
Well, it does.
I don't think that's a feasible thing to have I mean, people put it down like, we need public transportation, but.
Yeah, it's a problem because, you know, as you were talking, was I just talking, I can't remember. Starting to discuss Simpson or maybe it was a city council or whatever. It was in city council. It would be great if we had like a metropolitan council, but one city, you know, because you kind of need intra-city stuff. And that kind of needs cooperation from a whole lot of organizations. So it's hard, it's an issue and maybe comes between.
And I guess 20 years from
the
now.
government helping, but we're gonna need outside resources for that too.
And I guess if we are thinking 20 years, that, you know, because it would be nice to be able to get to the airport without driving myself, because that's just a pain.
Will you call me next time you go? Drop her off anywhere for $50.
Well, that would make me a deal these days. It's actually not too bad. Is that a round trip?
Please, Hendra, are we missing anything?
Depends on expensive.
We do have mobility, moving people versus cars. And so that may be a place to capture some of that issue with public transportation, because I think it did come up quite a bit in the survey and the feedback here. So I know that there are significant barriers and challenges, but it may be something that, you know, we're identifying what those are and when an opportunity may emerge, or via intergovernmental cooperation or those kinds of things, that it's on our radar.
Right. And I know from like the students' perspective, you know, I have students that live in the dorms, don't have cars, that are like, boy, it'd be sure nice if I could at least get to Hudson, you know, somehow, some way, because I don't have a car and I live on campus, like to get to Target, to get to Walmart, for them would be super helpful. So yeah, it'd be worth.
And I think with things like this, it's what can the city do alone or in partnership with others? You know, I know some colleges will have a weekend circular, you know, or something like that. And for students, you know, to go live, access entertainment, that kind of thing. Could, if they did that, could they allow access to the general public or something like?
And the university did that pre-COVID. There was a couple weekends, they'd be like, we're gonna take a bus to the Mall of America. And so they, you know, it's the kind of a thing, but obviously COVID put the kibosh on that, so maybe it'll come back. But yeah, anyway.
I had appearance and character came out of the thing. I don't know, do we have density and compact growth up there? And diversity. And health down too.
Where are you coming up with all these?
I just thought of that. The survey.
Back on the transportation thing, I found it interesting when they, what is your desired way to go about? And ride shares way down in the bottom. You know, I'm just thinking of college kids, it'd be great to call Uber and, you know, Lyft and get. Is it that detrimental? I mean,
I think people just aren't, I mean, because it's not convenient, they're not thinking that, oh yeah, that's what I want to do,
yeah,
you know.
And I thought that was interesting too, walk and ride a bike and, you know, maybe that's just aspirational or that idea of it. But will they do that? I mean, I was a winter bike rider up until I skipped this year. I just thought, well, I think yeah, it's just too cold and I could work from home more often a little bit here. So we'll see what I do next year, but I just thought that was odd that I think there's kind of the idea of it. And so to take maybe knock those two out and say, you know, maybe the middle of the list is more realistic.
yeah.
That's just the way I.
Or even like a park and ride, I mean, you know, I don't know if there is a way to do, you know, like in DC, when I was a kid, my dad used to go to the movie theater in town and like people would just line up and people would be like, hey, I'm going to the Pentagon, and like 4 people would pile in the car and then they could use the high occupancy vehicle lanes to skip traffic. So it was like just randos getting into cars with each other going to Crystal City or the Pentagon. And I was wondering if there could be anything like that where like people that go to Hudson or the cities for work could be like, let's meet at the, you know, the, I don't know.
Just a parking lot.
The parking lot, yeah. Let's meet at Dick's because they've got a giant ass parking lot that nobody ever uses. We can park our cars there and go to the cities for a job and share a ride.
There's a ride share just north of town, past Aldi's.
Is there really?
Yeah, but
It's out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
pretty depressing.
Right.
Get murdered at? Like,
Yeah.
That's it, okay.
That's the murder.
It's like the bathrooms in the mall, they're like down the sketchiest hall ever. Okay, good to know.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
Awesome. No, that's
I'll
okay.
shut up.
That's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff. This is a good list for us to work through and kind of dig in a little bit. And, you know, we've got a couple themes that are fun elements that it aligns with, but figuring out how all of this works together and then what that starts to mean. So just to kind of wrap us up really quick, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about plan analysis, but really thinking about where we're headed next. So we just talked about what our key themes are, where are those focus areas, what are those opportunities that we could be looking at. That lets us figure out what does that mean then for goals. So from what we've heard, where do we want to be headed? What are our aspirations here? I really like to think of our goal statements being draft throughout the entirety of this process, because we might find out that we've set a goal that isn't achievable for X, Y, and Z reasons, or we've bit off more than we can chew for the other priorities that we have. So refining those throughout the process, but that really sets our goal, our next step into plan analysis. So again, diving in the spreadsheets, the maps, where do we need to make connections? Are we going to plan for new growth? Where do we need to focus on redevelopment? All of those critical components are really the next step of the process. Once we get through that analysis and find out what our potential solutions are and what our recommendations are, then we get into the real work of implementation. So then it's really, that's the critical part out of all of this, is that you have a list of things that you can be working and taking actions on. And that should be set up in a way when you're doing this in 10 years from now that you can go down the list and check out all of the things that you've done and what you need to be thinking about for the longer term. So that's really kind of, I won't go into any deeper here. We've had a good discussion tonight, but that's we'll be working with staff to start to think about what these goal statements are and then what that analysis is that we need to be completing and moving forward with. Where we'd like to be going in terms of next steps with all of you is we're thinking that we don't need to have, it's March, so we won't need to have an April meeting for the comp plan, but we'll make sure that you have an update where we're at with those goal statements and where we're headed. So we'll give you a month break from that side of things, allow us to do some work, but we're also thinking really critically about what the next phase of engagement looks like as well. So there'll be, in addition to the pet mayor, some new stuff coming out on EngageRF. So pay attention to that kind of stuff, but then also looking ahead to our pop-up events and kind of that next phase of when we're getting here, we've established goals, testing those goals and getting that additional feedback as well. Amy's gonna go talk to all of the 4 townships over the next, in April, attending their April meetings to kind of give them an update of what we're doing. The bike ped plan will also be doing some tours coming up here, and I don't know the dates on top of my head. But we can make sure that you guys have access, that's being worked through there as well, along with participation and where we can, getting the word out through some other community events and Earth Days coming up. There's some good events and.
I'd say there's some big sustainability thing going on with Earth Day right forward.
It's on day for.
Yeah, so that would be a good. And obviously, if you want to do anything in the university, I think that would be great too. The last day of class is May 6th and then final, so sometime, in April would be better than not, because the kids will all go home and let's quiet.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that we're already talking about end of school.
Oh, we're already talking about fall, like, the mayor said, it's already winter, it's already next winter. The summer's over, sorry.
Perfect. So, but please let us know if there's additional questions you guys are thinking about the results.
Are y'all gonna do like a survey not on our EngageRF, where there's like a standalone survey, or y'all planning on doing anything like that, or just really focusing it through that EngageRF tool?
We're a little nebulous at this point of, seeing how things change. I think our focus for EngageRF right now is these more interactive tools and what we're able to, if we see differences pop out there, I think that's a question for us to have as staff. I really think there's an emphasis in wanting to make sure that we can build this as a long-standing engagement tool. But if we need to get different engagement, do we need to look at a different platform? So we're nebulous in making sure that we're doing things in the way they get us our best engagement. So, and maybe if we have the same thing on EngageRF that we have on surveys, or whatever.
Well, and I think again, the survey that was done, the biannual surveys worth looking at too.
Yes.
So yeah, we've got like, did we just do our third or fourth? We've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, so you can see change over time with that too, so like worth looking at.
But I appreciate your time. Thanks for sticking with me.
Thank you. This is great. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.
Thinking that way.
You keep making bigger lists.
Really, isn't that implementation part, that's if we were gonna double. No, it'd be